I happened to overhear my stepmom and stepsister scheming to cut me out of my dad's inheritance, so I packed up and moved out, struggling on my own for a year. Now my dad knows why, and everything has changed. I'm a 23-year-old guy and had been living with my dad, stepmom, and stepsister for the past 5 years. My mom passed away when I was 16, and my dad remarried about a year later. It was a whirlwind marriage, and before I knew it, I had a new stepmom, Karen, and a stepsister, Lisa, who is 2 years younger than me. At first, things were okay. Not great, but okay. Karen attempted to take on the role of a loving mother, but it always felt artificial. Lisa was courteous, but distant. I chalked it up to the awkwardness of our new family dynamic and figured things would improve over time. After my mom died, my dad buried himself in his work, and that didn't change after he remarried. He's a successful business owner, often away on business trips or working late into the night. This left me spending a lot of time with Karen and Lisa, which was fine initially. We'd have family dinners when Dad was home, and on the surface everything seemed normal. I went off to college but stayed local, coming home on weekends and breaks. After graduation, I moved back in while looking for a job in my field. That's when things started to shift. Karen became less welcoming, making comments about how I should be out on my own by now. Lisa, who had just finished her own degree, moved back in as well. Suddenly the house felt crowded, and there was an underlying tension that I couldn't quite identify. I've been job hunting for a few months now, sending out applications and going on interviews. It's been tough in this economy, but I'm trying. Dad's been supportive, encouraging me to take my time and find the right fit. Karen, however, has been increasingly vocal about me needing to move out. Last week I overheard a conversation that turned my world upside down. I was in my room with the door closed when I heard Karen and Lisa talking in the hallway. They must have thought I was out because they weren't making any effort to keep their voices down. Karen was saying something about how they needed to get rid of me before the will was finalized. Lisa agreed, adding that they couldn't risk me getting an equal share. It didn't take a genius to figure out they were talking about me. I sat there frozen as they continued their conversation. They discussed various ways to convince my dad that I needed to move out. Karen suggested cutting off my access to the family car, making it harder for me to get to interviews. Lisa proposed accidentally breaking my laptop so I couldn't apply for jobs online. The conversation felt like it went on for hours, but it was probably only about 10 minutes. They talked about how much money they could get if I wasn't in the picture, about trips they could take and things they could buy, all while plotting to sabotage my life. When they finally moved away from my door, I felt sick to my stomach. These were people I'd lived with for years, who I'd considered family, and here they were plotting against me like I was some kind of obstacle to be removed. The next few days were a blur. I tried to act normal, but it was hard. Every interaction with Karen and Lisa felt tainted. I caught them watching me sometimes with calculating looks in their eyes, and it made my skin crawl. I thought about telling my dad, but hesitated. He seemed happy with Karen, and I didn't want to be the one to shatter that illusion. Plus, I had no proof. It would be my word against theirs, and I wasn't sure whose side he'd take. So I decided to play it cool and start making plans. I reached out to some friends asking if anyone needed a roommate. I doubled down on my job search, applying to positions I'd previously thought were beneath me, anything to get out of that house. A week after overhearing the conversation, I got my first break. A friend of a friend was looking for someone to sublet their apartment for 6 months while they studied abroad. The rent was steep, but it was doable if I dipped into my savings. I jumped at the chance. When I told my dad I was moving out, he seemed surprised, but supportive. Karen and Lisa, on the other hand, couldn't hide their glee. They made a show of helping me pack, all while exchanging knowing looks when they thought I wasn't paying attention. The day I moved out, I overheard them again. This time they were discussing how to ensure Dad didn't change the will now that I was gone. It made me realize that this wasn't just about getting me out of the house. They wanted to cut me out entirely. I've been in my new place for a month now. It's small and not in the best area, but it's mine. I'm still job hunting, picking up gig work where I can to make ends meet. It's not ideal, but it's better than living in that house with people who see me as nothing more than an obstacle to their inheritance. Dad calls every few days to check in. He's noticed that I don't come around much anymore, and I can tell he's worried. I make excuses about being busy with job hunting and settling into my new place. I can't bring myself to tell him the truth, not yet anyway. I've thought about hiring a lawyer, maybe trying to protect my inheritance, but the truth is, I don't care about the money. What hurts is knowing that the people I thought were my family see me as nothing more than a roadblock to their financial gain. Sometimes late at night I wonder if my mom would be disappointed in me for not fighting harder. But then I remember how she always taught me that family was about love, not blood or legal documents. By that definition, Karen and Lisa were never really my family at all. I'm not sure what the future holds. Part of me wants to confront them, to call them out on their scheming. Another part just wants to walk away and never look back. For now, I'm focused on building my own life, one that doesn't depend on anyone else's goodwill or inheritance. Last week, I finally landed a job. It's entry-level and the pay isn't great, but it's a start. I haven't told Dad yet. I'm not sure I want Karen and Lisa to know anything about my life anymore. The less they know, the less they can try to sabotage. I've started therapy, the cheapest I could find, trying to work through the anger and betrayal I feel. It's helping, slowly. My therapist suggested writing letters to Karen and Lisa, not to send, but to get my feelings out. I've filled notebooks with all the things I wish I could say to them. Sometimes I dream about my mom. In these dreams, she's always smiling, telling me she's proud of me. I wake up feeling a mix of comfort and loss. I miss her more than ever now, wishing I had her guidance to navigate this mess. I've thought about reaching out to my mom's side of the family. We lost touch after she died, mostly because it was too painful for all of us. But now I find myself craving that connection. Maybe it's time to rebuild those bridges. As the months have passed, I've settled into a routine: work, home, repeat. It's not exciting, but it's stable. I'm slowly building a life for myself, one that has nothing to do with Karen, Lisa, or any inheritance. Dad's birthday is coming up next month. I'm debating whether or not to go to the family dinner. Part of me wants to see him, to celebrate with him. But the thought of sitting across the table from Karen and Lisa, pretending everything is fine, makes me feel ill. I've started volunteering at a local youth center on weekends. Many of the kids there come from broken homes or have lost parents. I can relate to them in a way I never could have before all this happened. It's been healing in its own way to help these kids navigate their grief and anger. Sometimes I wonder what Karen and Lisa tell people about why I moved out so suddenly. Do they paint me as the ungrateful stepson or stepbrother who abandoned the family, or do they simply pretend I never existed? I try not to dwell on it, but the thoughts creep in sometimes. I've made some new friends at work and through my volunteering. It's nice to have people in my life who know me for who I am, not for my potential inheritance or family connections. These relationships feel more genuine than anything I had with Karen or Lisa. The other day, I ran into Lisa at the grocery store. It was awkward, to say the least. She acted overly friendly, asking about my job and my new place. I kept my answers vague and got out of there as quickly as I could. The encounter left me shaken for days. I've started thinking about my long-term future. Do I want to stay in this city where I might run into Karen or Lisa at any time? Or do I want to make a clean break, move somewhere new where no one knows my history? The idea is tempting, but I'm not sure I'm ready to leave my dad behind just yet. As my lease nears its end, I'm faced with decisions. Do I renew or look for a better place? The idea of moving again is exhausting, but so is the thought of staying in this tiny apartment indefinitely. It's just another reminder of how much my life has changed in such a short time. I've started dating recently. Nothing serious, just a few casual dates here and there. It's been nice, but also challenging. I find myself hesitant to open up, worried about being hurt or betrayed again. My therapist says this is normal, that it will take time to rebuild my trust in people. Work has been going well. I recently got a small promotion which has helped ease my financial stress a bit. I'm no longer dipping into my savings every month just to make rent. It's a small victory, but it feels significant. I still haven't told Dad about overhearing Karen and Lisa's conversation. Every time I think about bringing it up, I talk myself out of it. What if he doesn't believe me? What if it causes a rift between us? The thought of losing him too is more than I can bear. Sometimes I find myself angry at my mom for dying, for leaving me in this situation. It's irrational, I know, but the feeling persists. If she were here, none of this would be happening. I'd still have a home, a family, a sense of belonging. I try to push these thoughts away, but they linger. I've started learning to cook. It's something I never had to do when living at home, but now it's a necessity. I'm not great at it yet, but I'm improving. There's something satisfying about creating a meal from scratch, about nourishing myself in this tangible way. The holidays are approaching, and with them comes a whole new set of challenges. Do I go home for Christmas? Do I make excuses to stay away? The thought of fake smiles and forced cheer around the dinner table makes my stomach churn. But the idea of spending the holidays alone isn't much better. I've been having trouble sleeping lately. I lie awake at night replaying that overheard conversation in my head. I analyze every interaction I've had with Karen and Lisa since they entered my life, wondering if there were signs I missed. It's exhausting, but I can't seem to shut my brain off. I've thought about confronting Karen and Lisa directly, letting them know that I heard everything, that I know what they're trying to do. But what would that accomplish? They'd probably just deny it or twist it somehow, and it might get back to Dad, causing more problems than it solves. Some days I'm okay. I go to work, I come home, I live my life. Other days the weight of everything that's happened crushes me. On those days it's hard to get out of bed, hard to face a world where the people who were supposed to be my family saw me as nothing more than an obstacle. I've started keeping a journal, writing down my thoughts and feelings each day. It helps somewhat to get it all out on paper. Maybe someday I'll look back on these entries and see how far I've come. For now, they serve as a record of this tumultuous time in my life. As I approach the 6-month mark of living on my own, I find myself reflecting on everything that's happened. I'm not the same person I was when I overheard that conversation. I'm stronger in some ways, more fragile in others. I'm learning to stand on my own 2 feet, to build a life that doesn't depend on anyone else's goodwill or inheritance. I don't know what the future holds. Will I ever confront Karen and Lisa? Will I tell Dad the truth? Will I be able to move past this betrayal and build trusting relationships again? These questions remain unanswered. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time, focusing on building a life that's entirely my own. It's not easy, and it's not the life I thought I'd have, but it's mine. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Update 1. It's been a year since I moved out of my dad's house after overhearing my stepmom and stepsister plotting to get rid of me. A lot has changed in that time, and not all of it for the better. I apologize for the delay in updating this post. Life has been incredibly hectic, and I've been struggling to find the time and emotional energy to sit down and write everything out. Between work, therapy, and just trying to keep my head above water, updating Reddit wasn't exactly a priority. But I know many of you have been wondering what happened, so I'm finally forcing myself to share this update. Thank you to everyone who commented on my original post with advice, support, and kind words. Your messages meant more to me than you could know, especially during those first few difficult months on my own. I tried to read every comment, even if I didn't have the capacity to respond to them all. Your support has been a bright spot in an otherwise dark time, and I'm grateful for this community. So now, on to the update. I'm still at the same job I landed shortly after moving out. The work is okay, but the pay is barely enough to cover my expenses. I've been looking for something better, but the job market is tough. Every rejection email feels like a personal failure, a reminder that I'm still struggling to get my life on track. My relationship with my dad has become strained. I've been avoiding family gatherings and making excuses not to visit. He's noticed, of course, and he calls more frequently now, asking if everything's okay. I hate lying to him. Another part of me just wants to forget about their schemes and move on without looking back. Right now, my focus is on building a life that's independent and not reliant on anyone else's generosity or inheritance. Just last week, I finally landed a job. It's not exactly glamorous, entry-level with modest pay, but it's a beginning. I haven't shared the news with Dad yet, mainly because I don't want Karen and Lisa to have any insight into my current life. The less they know, the less they can interfere. To cope with the anger and betrayal I feel, I've started attending therapy sessions, the most affordable option I could find. It's been a slow process, but it's helping. My therapist suggested I write letters to Karen and Lisa, not to send them, but to express my emotions. I've filled several notebooks with things I wish I could say to them. Occasionally I dream about my mom. In these dreams, she's always smiling and telling me she's proud of me. I wake up with mixed feelings of comfort and sorrow. I miss her guidance now more than ever, wishing she were here to help me through this chaos. I've been thinking about reconnecting with my mom's side of the family. After she passed away, we drifted apart because it was too painful to stay in touch. But now, I crave that connection again. Maybe it's time to rebuild those relationships. Over the past few months, I've settled into a routine. Work, home, repeat. It's not particularly exciting, but it's stable. I'm gradually constructing a life that doesn't revolve around Karen, Lisa, or any inheritance. Dad's birthday is coming up next month, and I'm torn about attending the family dinner. Part of me wants to see him and celebrate, but the thought of sitting across from Karen and Lisa, pretending everything is normal, makes me uneasy. I've started volunteering at a local youth center on weekends. Many of the kids there come from broken homes or have lost parents. I can relate to them in ways I never could have before all this happened. Helping these kids navigate their grief and anger has been a healing experience for me, too. Sometimes I wonder what Karen and Lisa tell people about my sudden departure. Do they portray me as an ungrateful stepson or stepbrother who abandoned the family? Or do they just pretend I never existed? I try not to dwell on it, but the thoughts creep in occasionally. I've made some new friends at work and through my volunteering. It's refreshing to have people in my life who know me for who I am, not for my potential inheritance or family ties. These new relationships feel more genuine than anything I had with Karen or Lisa. Recently, I bumped into Lisa at the grocery store. The encounter was painfully awkward. She put on an overly friendly act, asking about my job and my new place. I kept my responses vague and left as quickly as I could. The meeting left me unsettled for days. I've started contemplating my long-term future. Should I stay in this city where I might run into Karen or Lisa at any moment? Or should I make a clean break and move somewhere new where no one knows my history? The idea is appealing, but I'm not sure I'm ready to leave my dad behind just yet. With my lease ending soon, I have some decisions to make. Should I renew or look for a better place? The thought of moving again is exhausting, but so is the idea of staying in this cramped apartment indefinitely. It's another reminder of how drastically my life has changed in such a short period. I've started dating again. Nothing serious, just a few casual outings. It's been nice, but also challenging. I find it hard to open up, fearing I'll be hurt or betrayed again. My therapist says this is normal and that it will take time to rebuild my trust in others. Work has been going well. I recently received a small promotion which has eased my financial stress a bit. I'm no longer dipping into my savings every month just to cover rent. It's a small victory, but it feels significant. I still haven't told Dad about overhearing Karen and Lisa's conversation. Every time I consider bringing it up, I hesitate. What if he doesn't believe me? What if it causes a rift between us? The thought of losing him too is more than I can handle. Sometimes I feel angry at my mom for dying and leaving me in this mess. It's irrational, I know, but the feeling lingers. If she were here, none of this would be happening. I'd still have a home, a family, a sense of belonging. I try to push these thoughts away, but they persist. I've also started learning to cook. It's something I never needed to do when I lived at home, but now it's essential. I'm not great at it yet, but I'm getting better. There's something satisfying about making a meal from scratch and nourishing myself in such a tangible way. With the holidays approaching, a whole new set of challenges is looming. Do I go home for Christmas or do I make excuses to stay away? The idea of forced smiles and fake cheer around the dinner table makes me nauseous. But spending the holidays alone isn't much better. Lately I've been having trouble sleeping. I lie awake at night, replaying that overheard conversation in my head. I analyze every interaction I've had with Karen and Lisa, wondering if there were signs I missed. It's exhausting, but I can't seem to turn off my mind. I toyed with the idea of confronting Karen and Lisa directly, telling them I overheard their scheme and knew exactly what they were up to. But what good would that do? They'd likely just deny it or twist the story around, and then it might all get back to Dad, creating even more chaos. Some days I manage to go to work, come home, and carry on as if everything is normal. But other days the weight of it all feels unbearable. On those days, it's a struggle to even get out of bed, knowing the people who were supposed to be my family see me as an obstacle. I've taken up journaling to deal with my thoughts and emotions. Each day I write down my feelings, and it does help a bit to see it all laid out on paper. Maybe someday I'll look back at these entries and see how much I've grown. Right now, they serve as a record of this difficult period in my life. As I hit the 6-month mark of living on my own, I reflect on everything that's transpired. I'm not the same person I was when I first overheard their conversation. In some ways, I'm stronger. In others, I'm more vulnerable. I'm learning to stand on my own and build a life that isn't dependent on anyone else's goodwill or inheritance. I'm unsure of what lies ahead. Will I ever confront Karen and Lisa? Will I tell Dad the truth? Can I move past this betrayal and learn to trust again? These questions linger without answers. For now, I'm taking things day by day, focusing on creating a life that's entirely my own. It's not easy, and it's not the life I imagined, but it's mine. Maybe that's enough. A year has passed since I moved out of my dad's house after overhearing Karen and Lisa's plotting. So much has changed, and not all of it for the better. I'm sorry for the delay in updating this post, but life has been incredibly busy. Between work, therapy, and just trying to stay afloat, updating Reddit hasn't been my top priority. But I know many of you have been wondering what happened, so I'm finally forcing myself to share this update. Thank you to everyone who commented on my original post with advice, support, and kind words. Your messages meant more to me than you can imagine, especially during those first tough months. I tried to read every comment, even if I couldn't respond to them all. Your support has been a bright spot in an otherwise dark time, and I'm grateful for this community. Now, on to the update. I'm still at the same job I found shortly after moving out. The work is okay, but the pay barely covers my expenses. I've been searching for something better, but the job market is tough. Each rejection feels like a personal failure, a reminder that I'm still struggling to get my life on track. My relationship with my dad has become strained. I've been avoiding family gatherings and making excuses not to visit. He's noticed, of course. He calls more frequently, asking if everything's okay. I hate lying to him, but I can't bring myself to tell him the real reason I left. The few times I've seen him, he looks worried and tired. I wonder if Karen and Lisa are causing him stress or if he's just concerned about me. I did go to his birthday dinner a few months ago. It was as uncomfortable as I expected. Karen and Lisa were all smiles and fake cheer, asking about my job and apartment with a saccharine tone. I could see the calculations behind their eyes, probably wondering if I was struggling enough to give up any claim to an inheritance. I left as soon as I could, making an excuse about an early meeting the next day. The holidays were tough. I told Dad I couldn't make it home for Christmas, claiming I had to work. In reality, I spent the day alone in my apartment, eating a microwave turkey dinner and watching old movies. It was depressing, but it was still better than pretending to be part of a happy family with Karen and Lisa. I've been thinking more about telling Dad the truth, but each time I consider it, I talk myself out of it. What if he doesn't believe me? What if it causes a rift between us? Or worse, what if he does believe me but chooses to stay with Karen anyway? I'm not sure I could handle that kind of rejection. Therapy has been helpful, but progress is slow. I'm still working through the anger and betrayal. My therapist says healing takes time, but some days it feels like I'll never get past this. I've had a few more run-ins with Lisa around town. Each time she acts like everything's normal, like we're still one big happy family. It makes my skin crawl. I've started avoiding certain places to minimize the chances of seeing her or Karen. Volunteering at the youth center has been a bright spot. I've connected with some of the kids, especially a teenager named Alex who lost his mom last year. Helping him navigate his grief has been healing for me, too. It's a reminder that there's still good in the world and still connections to be made. I've tried dating a few times over the past year, but it hasn't gone well. I struggle to open up, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. My last date ended with the girl telling me I had too much baggage. She's probably right. My lease is up next month and I'm not sure what to do. The idea of moving is exhausting, but I'm also tired of this tiny apartment with its noisy neighbors and unreliable heating. I've been looking at places in other parts of town, maybe even the next city over. A fresh start is tempting. I reached out to my mom's sister, my Aunt Laura. We hadn't spoken in years, not since Mom's funeral. It was awkward at first, but as we talked it felt like reconnecting with a part of myself I'd lost. She invited me to visit her family for a weekend. I'm considering it, though the idea of explaining everything that's happened is daunting. Work has become more stressful. There are rumors of layoffs, and as a newer employee I'm worried I'll be let go. The thought of losing my job terrifies me. My savings are almost depleted, and the thought of staying financially stable without a steady income keeps me up at night. I've been having nightmares about ending up on the streets or being forced to return to Dad's house to face Karen and Lisa. These nightmares wake me up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding, and it takes me hours to calm down and get back to sleep. My birthday came and went with little fanfare. Dad called, of course, and a few friends took me out for drinks. Still, it was hard not to compare it to the birthdays when Mom was alive, filled with big family celebrations. The difference was stark and deeply depressing. Lately, I've been thinking about my mom a lot, wondering what she'd think of all this and how she'd advise me to handle it. Sometimes I find myself talking to her photo, spilling out everything that's happened. It might sound silly, but it helps. The anger I feel towards Karen and Lisa hasn't faded over the past year. If anything, it's intensified. I often fantasize about confronting them, laying out everything I know. In my daydreams, they break down and confess, and Dad kicks them out. But I know that's just wishful thinking. I've started exploring legal options just in case. I met with a lawyer who specializes in estate law, but without concrete proof, there's not much I can do to safeguard any potential inheritance. He suggested I talk to my dad about setting up a trust, but that would mean revealing everything to him. I'm not ready for that conversation yet. The stress has started to affect my health. I've lost weight and I'm constantly exhausted. My doctor says my blood pressure is high and that I need to find ways to relax. Easier said than done. I've considered moving away completely, starting fresh in a new city where there's no chance of running into Karen or Lisa. But the idea of leaving Dad behind and potentially never seeing him again is too heartbreaking to seriously consider. Despite all the darkness, there have been moments of light. I've made a few good friends at work and through volunteering. They don't know the full story, but they've been supportive in their own ways. It's comforting to have people in my life who like me for who I am, not because of any potential inheritance. I've picked up new hobbies to fill my time and distract myself. I've been learning to play guitar, something I always wanted to do but never had the time for before. I'm not very good yet, but the learning process is satisfying. I've also started running. Initially, it was just a way to get out of my apartment and clear my head, but I've found that I enjoy it. There's something freeing about pushing my body to its limits, leaving all my worries behind for a while. As the one-year mark of my move-out approached, I felt increasingly anxious. It seemed like I should have made more progress by now, should be in a better place. My therapist says I'm being too hard on myself, that healing isn't linear. I am trying to believe her. I finally visited Aunt Laura and her family. It was nice to be around people who knew my mom, who could share stories about her that I'd never heard before. For a weekend, I felt like I belonged somewhere again. But coming back to my empty apartment afterward was harder than I expected. The visit stirred up complicated feelings. Aunt Laura asked about Dad and how he was doing with his new wife. I found myself unable to answer, choking on the words. She noticed and gently probed for more information. I ended up telling her everything. Aunt Laura was furious on my behalf. She wanted to call Dad immediately to confront Karen and Lisa herself. I had to calm her down, explain why I hadn't told him yet. She didn't agree with my decision but respected it. Before I left, she made me promise to keep in touch and let her know if I needed anything. Knowing that someone from my mom's side of the family is in my corner has been comforting. Aunt Laura calls regularly now, checking in on me. She's even offered to let me stay with her family if things get too tough financially. I'm not ready to take her up on that yet, but it's nice to know the option is there. As for Dad, things came to a head last week. He showed up at my apartment unannounced, worry etched on his face. He said he couldn't stand the distance between us anymore and needed to know what was going on. I tried to deflect and make excuses, but he wasn't having it. We ended up talking for hours. I told him everything, overhearing Karen and Lisa's conversation, my fears about the inheritance, why I've been avoiding family gatherings. It all came pouring out in a rush of uncontrollable emotion. Dad listened silently, his face growing more grave with each word. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he apologized. He said he had no idea any of this was happening, that he'd been blind to what was going on in his own home. He didn't outright say he believed me, but he didn't dismiss my concerns either. He promised to look into things, to pay closer attention to Karen and Lisa's behavior. He also said he'd talk to his lawyer about protecting my inheritance regardless of what happened with his marriage. After our talk, I felt a mix of relief and guilt. Relieved that the truth was finally out, but guilty for potentially shattering my dad's marriage and his happiness. It's a heavy burden, but for now, I have to trust that we've taken a step in the right direction. Disrupting his life and marriage was something I dreaded. Dad assured me that sharing the truth was the right thing to do, emphasizing that he needed to know, but the conflict in his eyes was unmistakable. It's been a week since our conversation, and I've barely heard from him. He sent a text saying he was investigating and would contact me soon. I try not to read too much into his silence, but it's hard not to worry. Yesterday, Karen called me, her voice sickly sweet as she invited me to Sunday dinner. I turned her down, citing a work excuse. I can't help but wonder if she knows Dad and I had a conversation and if she's trying to cover her tracks. The thought makes my stomach churn. As I approach the start of my second year living independently, I find myself at a significant crossroads. Should I stay here, close to Dad but also to Karen and Lisa? Should I take Aunt Laura up on her offer and move closer to my mom's family? Or should I pack up and start fresh in a new city, far from all this? I don't have the answers yet, but for the first time in a long while I feel like I have choices. The future is uncertain, but it doesn't seem as hopeless as it did a year ago. I'm not completely okay, but I feel like I'm getting there. For now, I'm taking things one day at a time. I'm concentrating on my job, my volunteer work, and my new hobbies. I'm building a life that's entirely my own, one that doesn't rely on anyone else's goodwill or inheritance. It's challenging, and it's not the life I had envisioned, but it's mine. Maybe that's enough. Talking to Dad has stirred up a lot of old emotions. I think about Mom more than ever, wondering what she would make of all this. Would she be proud of me for standing on my own, or disappointed that I didn't fight harder? I'll never know, and that uncertainty eats at me. I've been having trouble sleeping again. Every time my phone rings, I get anxious, wondering if it's Dad with news. The waiting is torturous. I've thrown myself into work and my hobbies, anything to keep my mind busy. But in the quiet moments, the worry creeps back in. Update 2. Lisa tried to add me on social media last week. I ignored the request, but it left me feeling uneasy. Is she trying to keep an eye on me, or is it just another attempt to pretend we're a happy family? Either way, I want nothing to do with it. I've been thinking a lot about the future lately. Before all this, I had vague plans of possibly going to grad school or advancing in my career. Now I feel like I'm just trying to survive, to keep my head above water. I wonder if I'll ever be able to think about the future with hope again instead of anxiety. The lease on my apartment is up next week. After much thought, I've decided to move. Not far, just to a slightly nicer apartment in a different part of town. It's a small step, but it feels like a big deal, like I'm choosing to move forward instead of staying stuck. I had dinner with Alex from the youth center last night. He's heading off to college soon and wanted to thank me for all the support I've given him over the past year. Seeing his progress, how he's working through his grief and moving forward, gave me a spark of hope. Maybe I can do the same. As I pack up my apartment, I reflect on my life. A year ago, I left home with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. Now I have a job, an apartment, friends. It's not much, but it's something I've built for myself. There's a certain pride in that, mixed with lingering pain and uncertainty. I'm still waiting to hear from Dad about what he's found out. The silence is deafening, but I'm trying to be patient. Whatever happens, I know I'll face it. I'm stronger now than I was a year ago. I've survived betrayal, loneliness, and uncertainty. I can survive whatever comes next. For now, I'm focusing on my move, on setting up my new apartment, on making it feel like home, on continuing to build a life that's mine regardless of what happens with Dad, Karen, and Lisa. It's not the life I thought I'd have, but it's the one I'm living, and for today that has to be enough. 3 months have passed since my last update, and life has been a whirlwind of change. It's hard to know where to begin, but I suppose the biggest news deserves the spotlight. After our intense discussion where I revealed everything about overhearing Karen and Lisa's schemes, Dad spent weeks meticulously investigating. He hired a private investigator, combed through financial records, and even orchestrated some undercover operation that he hasn't fully disclosed to me. Ultimately, he unearthed more than enough evidence to substantiate everything I'd told him, and even uncovered more. Turns out, for years, Karen and Lisa had been stealthily siphoning money from Dad's accounts. They made small, seemingly inconspicuous withdrawals that eventually added up to a substantial amount. Additionally, they were emotionally manipulating Dad to pressure him into changing his will, a tactic the private investigator documented in detail. When Dad confronted them with the evidence, the situation exploded. Karen first denied everything, then attempted to pin the blame on Lisa. Lisa, under pressure, broke down and confessed, implicating Karen as well. It was utter chaos. In short, Dad filed for divorce and is pressing charges for financial fraud. Karen and Lisa have moved out and, as far as I know, are staying with Karen's sister in another state. My feelings about all this are complicated. On one hand, I feel vindicated. My fears and suspicions were confirmed. On the other hand, watching Dad go through this is painful. He genuinely loved Karen, or at least believed he did, and discovering it was all a facade has been heartbreaking for him. Dad and I are talking more now. He has apologized repeatedly for not seeing what was happening and for not believing me sooner. While I've forgiven him, our relationship is still a bit strained. We're working on it, though. We've started having weekly dinners, just the two of us. It's awkward at times, but it's a start. As for me, I'm still settled in my new apartment. The move was beneficial. It feels like a new beginning, a place that's truly mine without any ties to Karen or Lisa. I've been gradually furnishing it, making it feel like home. It's modest, but it's mine, and that means a lot. Work has also been going better. The layoffs I feared didn't materialize, and I even received a small raise. It's not much, but it's enough to keep me from living paycheck to paycheck. I've started saving a little each month, and while it's not a lot, it's a start. Therapy is ongoing, and my therapist says I'm making progress, even if it doesn't always feel that way. The anger and betrayal are still there, but they're not as overwhelming as they once were. I'm learning to live with what happened and not let it define me. I've been spending more time with my mom's side of the family. Aunt Laura has been a godsend through all of this. She's become a sort of surrogate mother figure, always ready with advice or a listening ear when I need it. Visiting her family more often has helped me reconnect with my cousins. It's nice to feel like I have a family again, even if it's not the one I grew up with. Dating is still complicated. I've been on a few dates, but nothing serious. I'm still working on trusting people and opening up. My therapist says this is normal and that it will take time. I'm trying to be patient with myself. One unexpected development is that I've started writing. It began as simple journaling, but now I'm thinking about turning my experiences into a book, perhaps a memoir or a fictionalized account. Writing has been cathartic, a way to process everything that's happened. Dad and I had a long talk last week about the inheritance issue. He set up a trust for me, separate from his personal assets, to ensure I'm taken care of no matter what happens. I tried to tell him it wasn't necessary, that I don't care about the money, but he insisted. I think it's his way of trying to make amends. Dad's also talking about selling the house. Too many bad memories, he says. Part of me is sad about it. It was my childhood home, after all, but I understand his need for a fresh start. We've been looking at smaller places together. He jokes about becoming roommates, but we both know we need our own spaces. I ran into one of Lisa's friends at the grocery store last week. She glared at me and muttered something about me ruining Lisa's life. I wanted to yell back, to defend myself, but instead I just walked away. Their opinions don't matter anymore. I know the truth, and that's enough. Work has been a good distraction through all of this. I've thrown myself into my job, taking on extra projects whenever I can. My boss has noticed and hinted at a possible promotion in the near future. It's nice to feel valued and to know that my hard work is paying off. Dad and I are planning a trip together, nothing fancy, just a weekend at a nearby lake where we used to go camping when I was a kid, before Mom got sick. It feels like a step towards rebuilding our relationship, towards creating new memories to replace the painful ones. I've been thinking about Mom a lot lately, wondering what she would think of everything that's happened. I miss her more than ever. Aunt Laura gave me a box of Mom's old things last time I visited. Photos, letters, even some of her jewelry. Going through it was emotional but healing too. It's nice to have these tangible connections to her. I've started reaching out to old friends, people I lost touch with when everything went down with Karen and Lisa. Some have been receptive, others not so much. But it feels good to be rebuilding my support network, to have people in my life who knew me before all this happened. The legal proceedings against Karen and Lisa are ongoing. Dad's lawyer keeps us updated, but I try not to focus on it too much. They'll face consequences for their actions, but I don't want their fate to control my life anymore. I've been thinking about the future more lately, not just surviving day to day, but actually planning ahead. I'm considering going back to school, maybe for a master's degree. It's a big step, but for the first time in a long time, I feel capable of taking it. There are still bad days, but the good days are starting to outnumber them. I'm not completely okay, but I'm getting there. I'm building a life for myself, one that's not defined by what Karen and Lisa tried to do to me. It's not the life I thought I'd have, but it's mine, and for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to see what the future holds. To everyone who's followed my story and offered support and advice along the way, thank you. Your kindness has meant more than you know. This will be my final update. It's time for me to close this chapter of my life and focus on writing the next one. Wish me luck.